Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Chew. I'm Pastor Robert. Pentecost. We're continuing to look at Pentecost this week from Acts chapter 2. Today we're going to be looking at Receive the Holy Spirit. Now, yesterday I read Peter's sermon from Acts chapter 2, verses 14 through 41. And I want to invite you to go and read Acts chapter 2 as many times as possible this week. And each time you read it, before you do, simply ask the Holy Spirit to give you eyes to see and ears to hear God's truth from His Word. Have a receptive heart and mind to receive these truths. And then, as the Holy Spirit nudges you to take action, be bold enough, committed enough, and courageous enough to do what the Holy Spirit leads you to do. It's important that we act on our faith, expecting that we will be recipients of what the Holy Spirit is leading us to do. This is what the disciples were doing in the upper room. They were waiting and praying with expectation. And you can read about that in Acts chapter 1, verses 4 through 5. Luke writes that the disciples were reminded by Jesus that the Holy Spirit would come. It was a promise of God the Father. And that as John baptized with water, so the Holy Spirit would baptize them with fire and to empower them. In the 10 days after Jesus ascended to heaven to be at the right hand of the Father, the disciples were gathered together in this upper room, and they were praying and they were seeking. And Peter reminded them that Judas had to be replaced. And so they prayed about that, and then they ended up being believed that they were led by the Holy Spirit. They cast lots, and Matthias was appointed to replace Judas. And you can read the entirety of that in Acts chapter 1, verses 12 through 26. But you'll notice in chapter 2, verses 1 through 13, that when the Holy Spirit came on the day of Pentecost, it was a visible sign. There were two visible signs, really, if you think about it. The first was the tongues of fire that rested upon them, and then that many of them were enabled by the Holy Spirit to speak the different languages of all the Jews that had come into Jerusalem for the Pentecost, for the festival of feasts. And you can read about the festival of feasts in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 1 through 11. I apologize, I misspoke. It's the festival of first fruits. God's amazing in His timing, although we shouldn't not be surprised. Think about it. Exactly what happened here. They are assembled in Jerusalem, Jews from all around the world, for the festival of first fruits. And on the day of Pentecost, empowered by the Holy Spirit, these brothers and sisters declare the good news to all of those within their hearing from different languages. Yet they heard God's truth, empowered by the Holy Spirit. And here Peter is in his sermon declaring to them the good news, reminding them of prophecy from the Old Testament. And he did it in a direct fashion, yet their hearts were pricked for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they cried out, wanting to know what they needed to do. And as you read the sermon, you'll see Peter gives them instructions to be saved and to believe in Jesus and to be baptized. Think about this. 3,000 were added to their number that day. Talk about first fruits. The 3,000 were the first fruits of the church that Jesus established. Jesus led the disciples to become new creations. You can read that in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, and to have new attitudes. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 23. And Jesus is inviting you and I to the same experience. Receiving the Holy Spirit is key to what took place on the day of Pentecost. And receiving the Holy Spirit is a promise of God. You might want to remember how Peter was before the crucifixion and before he received the power of the Holy Spirit. Peter was always quick to jump in. Remember when he wanted to walk on the water with Jesus in Matthew chapter 14, verses 28 through 31, how he got distracted by what was going on around the world and started to sink. Jesus reached out his hand to save him. I encourage you to read that passage. And then what about his denial of Jesus 3 times in a very short period of time? In Luke chapter 22, verses 54 through 62, you can read that account. Now, here's Peter, the day of Pentecost, full of the power of the Holy Spirit. He is a different man. He is able to speak because of the Holy Spirit with clarity and with directness, so that everyone within his hearing could hear the good news. And he did it because of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit was able to work the word, to work the good news of Jesus Christ into the hearts of many that were assembled there. And again, we see the result of that. 3,000 were added to their number that day. Now, Jesus knows that we need the Holy Spirit power in our lives to serve those around us, to share the good news of Jesus Christ, to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. The question is, are we surrendered to his power and to his leadership? Are we willing to allow God's plan to work in our lives instead of our own? Are we yielding to the enabling power of the Holy Spirit? This, my friends, is the way of Jesus. Which way are you choosing? Are you choosing the way of Jesus, or are you choosing your own way? I pray that as you consider this today, and as you prayerfully read these passages, that you'll have a blessed day, and that you will find the Holy Spirit working in your life to help you be all that you can be for the cause of Christ. Have a blessed day, my friends. Go in the peace of God. Bye for now.